In 1966, Ruth Teuscher donated her 40 acres of land known as Hawthorn Hollow to the Hyslop Foundation. The Hyslop Foundation agreed to preserve Hawthorn Hollow in perpetuity and to manage it according to Ruth's wishes. It was named Hawthorn Hollow Nature Sanctuary and Arboretum with a mission of conservation and education. An animal lover, Ruth purchased Hawthorn Hollow in 1935 as a place where she could stable her horses. Ruth and her sister Margaret Teuscher were both high school teachers. Ruth taught English and Margaret home economics. Ruth and Margaret spent their summers along the Pike River, which runs through the property. It was their favorite place to entertain guests. The Pike River Watershed is located in far southeast Wisconsin. It spans both Racine and Kenosha counties and empties into Lake Michigan. The Pike River is made up of 3 branches. The South Branch flows north. The North Branch flows south. They meet near the center of the watershed and form the main branch of the Pike River, which flows east and then south and empties into Lake Michigan. Hawthorn Hollow is situated on the south branch of the Pike River. Like most watersheds, the Pike River watershed has been greatly altered since the settlers began arriving in the 1830s. Historically, much of this watershed was wetland in the form of wet prairies and shallow and deep marshes. The wetlands were replaced with crops. As farming took a hold on this region, removing water from the land became an industry. Water was diverted off the land and into the nearest waterway. Roads, too, would influence our waterways. To keep roads safe, water is shed into ditches or storm drains, which often carry stormwater to the nearest river or stream. Not only roads and agriculture would influence our waterways. Developments such as parking lots, shopping centers, industrial parks, and subdivisions also played a role. Like the Green Bay Road widening, development increased impervious surfaces in the watershed, which doesn't allow rainwater to stay where it falls. Instead, it was directed off the land. Stormwater regulations improved in the mid-2000s, restricting the amount of stormwater leaving a development site. One thing we know for certain is that the stretch of the Pike River that runs through Hawthorn Hollow has changed significantly since 1947. Thanks to a guest visiting Ruth and Margaret, who made movies of the visit, we get a glimpse of the river of the past. 70 years later, we see a very different river. Virtually all of the changes are due to an increase in the flow of water running through the river. In 2011, Hawthorn Hollow partnered with the Root-Pike Watershed Initiative Network and the University of Wisconsin Extension to develop the Pike River watershed-based plan. Many stakeholders took part in the 2-year planning process. The final plan was completed in August of 2013. The plan listed Hawthorn Hollow stream banks as critical areas needing restoration. High water in the river scours out the banks, causing erosion and trees to become unstable. As trees fall in, erosion is exacerbated. As the banks fall in, the sediment clouds the water and will coat the stream bed, creating an inhospitable habitat for many aquatic invertebrates. In addition, sediments contain nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus that pollute the river and lake. Severe events like this one are especially hard on the banks. The ice chunks and woody debris scrape along the banks, amplifying the erosion. Of the almost 1 mile of stream bank at Hawthorn Hollow, it was determined that we could reduce 244 tons of total suspended solids or sediment from entering the river annually if we restored our stream banks. While we hope to do that eventually, to begin, we decided on a project that would serve as a demonstration of how to reduce stormwater from entering the river. Our main trail through the property is our single largest source of stormwater runoff. The gravel bed makes it an impervious surface, and stormwater causes erosion to the road and to the stream bank where the water enters the river. The project would create a swale next to the road that would carry the water into a low area isolated from the river. The arrows show how the water sheds off the road. The light blue lines show where the swale would be constructed and the low area where the water will collect and percolate into the ground. We were surprised to learn that the road collected water from over 2 acres of land. Construction began in July of 2016. The project was completed at the end of July 2016. As it finished up, we began watching weather reports almost hourly, waiting for the first big storm. With the project finished and a seeming success, I had a question I wanted to ask our project engineer, Gary Rosh. Putting our stormwater off to the side so it would get off of the road, we were talking to some other engineers, and their first inclination was to shoot that water that was coming off of here into the river. And I said, no, we don't want it to go into the river. Instead, we want it to go into this other low area. And what I wonder is, why is that the first thought that somebody comes up with? To put it to the river. Why is that?
I think it goes back to that. The first thought is, water's bad, water's the enemy, so let's get rid of it as quickly as we can.
Okay.
So,
all right.
And I'd like to think that in my career, the last several decades, that philosophy should have changed more widespread than maybe it has, but that the water that runs off isn't something nasty that we have to get rid of.
Yes.
It's a resource that we should be managing
Yeah.
and keeping on site as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. I just had to ask that.
Now, I had to ask myself, how can stormwater be a resource like Gary said, and why should we keep it on the land rather than diverting it to the river? Historically, when it rained, a lot of it stayed pretty close to where it landed, percolating into the ground and recharging aquifers. Diverting that water off the land and into rivers reduces aquifer recharge, lowering the water table. As more well water is used and less rainwater is available for aquifer recharge, the deeper that wells need to be drilled. Hawthorn Hollow is located in an area that has a high to very high recharge potential, meaning that it's easy for water to percolate into the soils and groundwater. The stormwater that we diverted from entering the river is now directed into an area that will recharge groundwater. It's stormwater that's not being wasted.